What's up, everybody? I'm John Middlekauff. You know what I need you to do. Subscribe to our YouTube channel. We got content for days reacting to every NFL game all the time, every single day. Subscribe, like the videos. Let's go. What is going on? How are we doing? Sunday Night Football just ended. It's actually still technically going, and the Pittsburgh Steelers, the route is now officially on. The Jets get worked in the second half, fall to 2-5. The Steelers insert Russell Wilson, who looked extremely shaky off the jump, and go to 5-2 and are rolling. This is what we said last week. Why the Bills game was so big. They were just going to go into Pittsburgh. So many people picking them. The Steelers were an underdog. It was insanity. This team full of mercenaries. They're a team full of mercenaries. And they lost again. But luckily for them, they get the Patriots this upcoming week. And maybe they can climb their way back to only 2 games under 500. But we will dive into this game off the top. Want to dive into some other stuff around the NFL. Indy's got a quarterback problem. I mean, I watched Anthony Richardson today. It was rough. The Browns were a big story today. DeShaun Watson popped his Achilles, ripped his Achilles. I always say pop, but then I think about it. I think it does pop, but it rips. And the fans booed. So I want to dive into that. And a couple other little things. Amari Cooper had a touchdown. So, yeah, you can find me and Colin went right after the afternoon games after the 49ers got curb stomped at home by the Kansas City Chiefs, who now officially have ownership in the 49ers. Like literally probably like 10% of Jed York's ownership that the Chiefs now have. And a lot of other stuff happened today as well that me and Colin talked about. The Lions game, the Packer game. Pretty good morning slate. The afternoon slate was pretty weak. Beside the Niner game, which turned out to be pretty crappy in the second half, or just if you're a 49er guy, because that sucked. But props to Andy Reid, who ran a play where Carson Wentz and Patrick Mahomes lined up as like running back / fullbacks. It was wild. And then he won the game because that's all Andy does now is win. But before we dive into a bunch of football stuff, the World Series here. So if you are a Dodger fan, if you're first time the Yankees have made the World Series in 15 years, pretty crazy. Brian Cashman's been the GM there since like 1916. He was dressed last night like he was going to a happy hour after that game. But if you want to go to a World Series game, if you want to go to one of these college football games, if you want to go to an NFL game, Taylor Swift, she's touring around. Any concert you want to go see, comedy show, get some laughs on, do it with my friends at Game Time. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code JOHN for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, code JOHN for $20 off. Download the Game Time app today. Last minute tickets, lowest prices guaranteed. Okay, let's dive into the game. Just a big picture thought, and it kind of hit me toward the end as the Steelers were kind of choking them out. That it reminded me a little bit of Saturday night, so far the biggest college football game of the year, when Georgia went into Texas and kicked their ass. And this isn't apples to apples because the Steelers were up against the ropes early on in that game. But the NFL is different than college. But over the course of the game, the cream rose, the best team won, and really the Steelers dominated them in the second half. Is that culture matters? Is it the ethos of your franchise, the direction of you are being led by your head coach, by your organization, by the beliefs that the emblem on the side of your helmet stands for? Certain organizations, it means something. And with the Pittsburgh Steelers, at the end of that game, Collinsworth said, he's like, it's crazy. We go to so many practices, and there isn't many practices, if any, like the Steelers on a Friday, where they go full pads, and they practice for 2 hours. He's like, I asked Tomlin, is it hard sometimes free agents, people talk, they don't want to come because they want no part of it? And Tomlin's like, yeah, we get guys that will turn us down for that. And you know what? They wouldn't want those guys because the Chiefs do the same thing. If you can't handle the physicality of practice, of the mental and physical toll that it takes being a member of this organization, don't come because you won't last. But most importantly, with the Steelers, and like a lot of good organizations, the Ravens, the Chiefs, there's stability. There's one vision. With the Jets this morning, Adam Schefter reported Hassan Reddick is coming back. His agents fired him, right? So he gets with Drew Rosenhaus, one of the great deal makers in like the history of business. And he got a deal done. And as Schefter reported, he's the first guy to hold out in the last decade into the season that got a reworked deal. And so I clicked on the article Schefter tweeted out. And do you know who was quoted in there that dealt with the deal? Was Drew Rosenhaus, who said he dealt directly with Woody Johnson. Who do you think made the trade last week for Davante Adams? Do you think it was Joe Douglas, who's clearly a dead man walking and will not be the general manager of the team next year because his deal's up and they haven't had any success? Of course not. It was Woody Johnson. You can't function like that. Now, listen, I don't pretend to be right about everything. Wrong often. Part of the gig. When Tomlin went to Russell Wilson, honestly, when the rumor started last week, I didn't believe him. I thought he was messing with the Jets. Thought it all week. And then it was pretty clear when the video went viral of George Pickens acknowledging that Russell Wilson was starting. I think that was on like either Thursday afternoon or Friday. It really couldn't be denied. I was like, yeah, maybe I was wrong. And then the game starts, and you're like, this is nuts. He's skipping balls. He looks atrocious. Like Mike Tomlin. And listen, anyone that's watching the baseball playoffs know, or if you just like baseball, in the playoffs, sometimes you take a pitcher out for someone in the bullpen, or you substitute a hitter for someone off the bench. Sometimes that guy hits a home run or strikes out the side and saves the game, and you win. And sometimes that guy grounds into a double play, and your season ends and you go home. And the manager looks like an idiot. But Mike Tomlin, when Russell Wilson starts, you don't have to go, do you think it was the Rooneys? Do you think it was the new GM? No, it was Mike Tomlin's decision. But whenever you go with the Jets, you go, what is going on? Who's making these decisions? And the answer is, I don't know. Sometimes it's the owner. Sometimes it's the 40-year-old quarterback who's nowhere near as good as he once was, even though he's way better than anything they've had. They're a team full of mercenaries. And going back to the Georgia-Texas game is the one thing that really stood out to me is there's like a way of life when you play football at Georgia. When we're playing well, we're going to try to destroy and hurt you physically. And for most people that we play, we're able to impose our will. And that's how the Steelers have often played. It's why when you close your eyes, you think about the Pittsburgh Steelers and they acknowledge the team from the 70s tonight, you think Mean Joe Green. You think when I was a kid, Greg Lloyd and Kevin Green. To now, TJ Watt and Minka Fitzpatrick and Highsmith off the edge and Cam Hayward in the middle. And now Joey Porter Jr., whose father also played there. And it's kind of what they stand for and who they are. And Mike Tomlin on the sideline. And as this game played out, you looked at the other side and you're like, this is just a team full of mercenaries, hired guns. In baseball, that works sometimes, right? You look at the teams in the World Series. I buy or trade for Juan Soto. I trade for Giancarlo Stanton. I buy Shohei Ohtani. I buy whoever, right? I trade for Mookie Betts. It's a plug-and-play sport. It doesn't matter. Chemistry's, as Billy Bean would tell you, relatively overrated. And I would kind of agree. In football, it's not. You can't just have Davante Adams show up on Tuesday or Wednesday and think, everything's fixed. Tomorrow, Hassan Reddick walks into the building. Come on in. You think he gives a shit that they're 2-5 and they've been kind of embarrassed the last couple of weeks on Monday and Sunday Night Football that their head coach was escorted out of the building a couple weeks ago? Hell no. Doesn't even know the guy. Why would he care? So when you get in these games, and at one point tonight, the game was really, really close. And I'm thinking like, God, the Jets might be able to pull this off right around halftime when they were winning 15-13. But then as the game goes, you realize these guys barely know each other. One, some of them aren't even that good anymore. This guy's had a great career. Tyron Smith, Hall of Fame level player. Stud. No one that played with him, that played against him, that knows the guy, never heard a negative, terse thing said about him. Publicly, privately, he's not any good anymore. Like, that's part of sports, right? You sign these big names. It's like, this ain't 2017. And you just look at the Jets and you're like, this ain't going to work. You go to an interim coach who's never been a head coach, who was, listen, I really liked him when I was a kid, when he was a player, and seems like an intense guy. But now their defense sucks. I mean, their defense is getting shredded these last 2 weeks. Why is that? Because he can no longer just focus on the defense. He's also got to be the head coach because that's his new responsibility. You look over at the Steelers sideline, they've had 3 fucking head coaches in like what feels like 100 years. And there's a hierarchy. Mike, and then on down. And everyone answers to him. And we all know what we're going to get. Tonight actually was kind of cool because they were in the red zone. They were like the 5-yard line. Tomlin looks at Arthur Smith, and you could tell he was saying something to him. And even Collinsworth's like, I bet he's telling him to run the ball. Turns out he was telling him, throw a fade to George Pickens. Didn't work, but clearly that came from Tomlin. Why? Because he's the boss. This is the knock on the Cowboys. You go, who's the boss? Well, it's Jerry, but he's not coaching me. Can I just circumvent him and go talk to the owner, even though the defensive coordinator is telling me one thing? These were famous stories forever about the Raiders. That if you ever wanted anything changed, schematically, play-wise, you just go around the coaching staff and go right to Al Davis. That's what happens with the Cowboys. That's kind of what's happening now with the Jets. And it's a problem. It does not work. And it definitely does not work when your owner's Woody Johnson. And you saw tonight an organization that's buttoned up that wins. Now, they haven't won a Super Bowl in a long time. They haven't even won a playoff game in a while. But they never have a losing record. And now it looks like they're headed toward one of their better seasons, over the last 3 or 4 years. Looks like they can get to 11 or 12 wins. Defense is really good. They're tough. They have an identity. Now we'll see this Russell Wilson, Justin Fields thing. Clearly they're going to go with Russell moving forward. But I just thought that was culture and organizations on full display tonight. And it was an eye-opening experience. And listen, I was wrong about Mike Tomlin, right? But that's why, when you get the head coach right, which is the reason he's had the job for a long time, you got to make tough decisions. And it's a lot easier to make suggestions than decisions. It's why so many guys go from coordinator positions or position coaches to coordinators and become overwhelmed. Because I've always thought I had the ideas. I've always made these suggestions, but I've never been the one to have to make the decision. That was a bold-ass move. It really was. I don't think any of us are alone that we thought he was insane early in the game when balls were hitting the ground, not even remotely close to wide receivers. Meanwhile, Rodgers is kind of slinging it around like he's 34. You're like, Mike, you are not going to be able to beat Aaron Rodgers and now Davante Adams and Breece Hall. And he's thinking in his head, maybe this ain't going well. Or just let it play out. Let's take a deep breath. We're not going to overreact to every single play like Woody Johnson up there in the box. And over the course of the game, it was clear it was the right decision. Russell Wilson can no longer really run, right? Justin Fields, who's a great athlete, that part of the game is done. They have no running element with their quarterback. But as Collinsworth mentioned on the broadcast, spreading the ball down on go routes and passes down the sideline opens up the offense that had not existed with Fields. And one thing Russell has always done, and everyone knows this, is throw a good go ball. Throw a great lollipop throw. And tonight, it still feels like he's a little off. He's clearly nowhere near as good as he once was. But he hit some of those passes. And George Pickens was a major, major factor tonight. That he had not become one or had become less and less of one with Fields. And then when they were doing that, it opened up the run game. And then they just took complete control of the Jets, whose defense has got to be one of the more fraudulent units going. But the Steelers can't win the AFC with Russell Wilson at quarterback. I think depending on the matchup, it would be tough for them to win a playoff game. But as the game played on, it was clear, like, okay, I get it. Even though Albert Breer tweeted, he like quoted one of Colin's tweets that was like, yeah, a lot of people around Pittsburgh. Because I think Colin asked, like, what did Russell look like this in practice? Because if he did, how'd you start him? And I just think he went with his gut. And that's part of being a leader. You got to make decisions where you don't have all the information. You go, I just know what is not working, and this is not going to be good when we play better teams. We're going to need to be a little more potent on offense in the passing game. Because if you can explode, if you have explosive passes, then they have to honor it, opens the line of scrimmage, and you can run the ball a little bit better, which is clearly what happened. Their passing game opened up the run game tonight. And listen, I'm not a Russell Wilson hater in the sense of he's one of the most electric players I've ever seen live, and I thought he was remarkable in the prime of his career. But the guy he's become doesn't really resemble that guy anymore. But he's better than Justin Fields as a passer. Not really debatable in a half. And this is a guy who didn't play a game, right, all season long, missed basically all of training camp, and what was he benched? The last several games of the season when Sean Payton, when they didn't want to pay him the bonus. So props to Mike Tomlin, because sometimes in life, you got to risk shit, right? Sometimes yeah, things are going okay. Well, if you want to take the next step, you got to roll the dice. And sometimes, you roll a situation and it blows up in your face. That's part of being the leader. It's part of being the head coach. And sometimes you do it and you feel really good about it. And now they probably even feel better about their quarterback situation. The other thing they learned this week is when the situation was playing out, and clearly the players knew it, is that Fields wore it like a 10-year vet. How mature he was. He didn't go, because early in training camp, he believed I should be the starting quarterback. And then when he was asked Wednesday or Thursday, he straight up said, like, I could have done more. I could have been better. I wasn't good enough. Like, damn, that was a really, really impressive comment. And that goes back to the culture thing. Because what was he going to say? Because that shit doesn't fly there. It's why when you start acting like an idiot, unless you're Antonio Brown and you're so damn good, they kind of got to deal with you. But unless you're an elite all-pro player, you kind of got to either shape in or they kick you out, right? And Fields been in that culture, and he's a high-character guy, no problems to begin with. But it was like, God, he just talks like a Steeler. He just blends right in. George Pickens is the one wild card, but again, he's by far their best wide receiver. And I think back to the Jets, man. You can't fake it in football. And I think when owners get involved, do you know who the Jets really feel right now? Like right now? A little Dan Snyder, mid 2000s Washington Redskins. That's kind of the vibes they get. And I saw Gottlieb put something out on social media, and he said that I think the Jets get an inordinate amount of coverage because such a large percentage of media people grow up in Long Island, are inclined to work or root for the Jets growing up. And I think there's probably some truth to that. I would just put New York as a whole, even if you grew up a Giants fan, you still watch so much of the Jets as a kid. They're just part of who you are to your core. And I also think just we are inclined to talk about the bigger markets in New York. But they get, like, at the end of the day, the Cowboys are a good example of, like, we talk too much. They go to the playoffs a lot. They're in a ton of big games that matter. The Jets simply are not. Now, this year's a little different because Aaron Rodgers is their quarterback. So they are a major conversation. But, like, they're a loss or two away from no one gives a shit. Like, this is a joke. Like, this is an embarrassment. And they get the Patriots next week, so they'll win and be like, everything's... It's like, that game couldn't mean any less to me. It's irrelevant. It does not matter. So they could win that game 75-0. I don't want to hear one opinion coming out about it. If you want to give some opinions about this game and, football-wise, obviously Davante opens it a little bit up for Garrett Wilson. If you can get Breece Hall a little involved. But their defense, their offense isn't that good. They scored 15 points tonight. And the Steelers' defense isn't exactly the 1975 version of the Steel Curtain. They scored 20 points last week, and 7 of them were on a fucking Hail Mary. So I think we have to acknowledge a couple things, right? Because we do it with all these other teams. Like, are the Bills, they have enough talent on defense? Are they explosive enough on offense? Yet it comes to the Jets, like, they're going to figure it out. No, they're not. They can't score points. They struggle to block for Aaron Rodgers. Their defense can't stop anyone who has any talent on offense. Their head coach has literally never been a head coach up until like 12 days ago. Their offensive coordinator has been run out of multiple places. Their superstar quarterback is 40 years old and no longer looks remotely close to what he once does or did. Yes, Breece Hall and Garrett Wilson are really talented. Quinnen Williams could play for my squad any day of the week. But like Davante just shows up, going to save the day. That's how that worked for the Raiders. I love Davante. Big fan. Fresno State, go Dogs. But give me a break. Hassan Reddick is just going to show up. Let's go get him, guys. Bullshit. No way. Because all these teams, I watched the Chiefs take it to the 49ers. That Chiefs unit now has been together for years. Years. Especially the defense. They have been playing together for a long period of time. They all know everything about each other. Their families, what they like to eat, what pisses them off, what they think is funny. Think how much time they've spent around each other. OTAs, training camp, playoff games, Super Bowl trips. I'm talking years. It's like Hassan Reddick should really help the defense. He should? The fuck's he been doing? Where's he been? Do you think he's really been training hard? Because one thing I heard this morning on one of the shows, or maybe I read some article that was like, he's really sticking to his guns. He believed he was getting screwed. So if he believed he was getting screwed and he was just fired by his agent, he probably thought they were never going to change the contract. So are we to believe that he has just been training his ever-loving ass off wherever he was? Because that would seem to be a little nuts to me. Now, he's a really talented player, but you're just saying you just show up October 21st and I expect you to just have a huge impact. It's like plug and play. When does it ever work like that unless like you're a kicker? So I'm just tired of talking about this team because we're force-fed them because they play in all these primetime games because of Rodgers and the way just they always feel like a headline story. And then you watch them play, you're like, the production does not outweigh like the importance that they feel on all of our, football lives. And they are a loss. Obviously, they're going to beat the Patriots. If they lose to the Texans, like, I'm sorry. We're going to ban them up until they show any signs of life. Now, if they win the next 2 games, which the Texans are clearly leaking a little oil, looked a little off today, all of a sudden it'd be like, they're 4-5. Look at their schedule. To get to 10 wins, which I think they would have to do to make the playoffs, right? Steelers are going to be in the playoffs. Obviously, the Ravens are in the playoffs. So that's one division winner and a wild card team. Chiefs are in the playoffs. You might want to Google the Chargers schedule. They're winning 11 plus. So that's another wild card spot and a division winner. Bills are in, and the Texans are in. Listen, Cincinnati's definitely not dead. There's going to be another team, I think, if we look around, and the Denver Broncos are 4-3. So I think they would have to be almost. This team's going 8-2. Cannot see it. I can't. Would I be shocked if the Steelers lost a couple games? Of course not. But when you build a 5-2 cushion, it's pretty easy to get to 10 wins because all you got to do over the last 10 games is go 5-5. Where Tomlin gets a lot of credit for making this move because it worked. The NBA is finally back. A new season means new ways to get into the action at DraftKings Sportsbook, an official sports betting partner of the NBA. Who's draining threes from beyond the arc? Who's hit the boards, getting rebounds? Get behind your favorite players on prop bets you can make on DraftKings, the home of NBA player props. Ready to place your first bet? Try betting something simple, like picking a team to win. Go to DraftKings Sportsbook app and place your bet. First time, new DraftKings customers bet $5 to win $200 in bonus bets instantly. Take it to the rack with DraftKings Sportsbook. Every point counts. Download the DraftKings Sportsbook app and use the code JOHN. That's code JOHN for new customers to get 200 in bonus bets when you bet just $5. Only on DraftKings. The crown is yours. Speaking of coaching, like, it really hit me this. For some reason, I couldn't really sleep. I get up probably at like 6:45 in the morning. The game had already started. Go out, make some coffee, uh, just kind of sit down, pour a big Stanley, and just watch the game for a little bit. And at first, you're like, God, are the Jags going to lose to the Patriots? And the answer was a hard no. And the Jags ended up working them. And there was a moment in that game late in the second half when the Patriots were down 9 points and they scored a touchdown, or they scored a touchdown to make it 9. So if they kick an extra point, they would be down 8. And Gerard Mayo went for 2. He didn't get it. And then I'm watching today, I had the game on a smaller TV. The Commanders versus the Carolina Panthers, which was, I don't know the final score. If you told me to guess, I'd guess 50-3. They absolutely, ruined them. And that's with Jaden Daniels getting injured and missing a large portion of the game, and Marcus Mariota came in and it looked exactly like Jaden Daniels. Think about last year. The Bears are not your normal number 1 overall drafting team, right? They got that pick from Carolina. But the second team was Washington, and the third team was the Patriots. Both teams sucked. One team drafts Jaden Daniels. The other team drafts Drake May. Now, in fairness, one team starts the guy. The other guy goes with Jacoby Brissett for a little bit, and he sucks. But if you just watch the two teams and even remove the records, right? Just go, you know what Washington has going for them? I don't think they're going to probably win a playoff game. I'd still bet against that because of the overall talent on their team. They have been winning against bad teams, and you deserve credit for that. We'll see as they play better teams. But we saw them play the Ravens, and it was one-sided, though the Ravens are probably, right there with the Chiefs, the best teams in the league. Think about the coaching for Washington. They got a real head coach who, you could nitpick him in Atlanta. He took them to the Super Bowl. Then he became the Dallas defensive coordinator, and they had one of the best defenses in the league for like 2.5 years. They hired Kingsbury, who should be your head coach, but he's an excellent coordinator. And you watch them play and you just go, God, they're just well coached. Obviously, they got a couple good players, and the rookie quarterback's been fantastic, but they're not exactly rolling out superstars at all these positions. They're depending on a lot of young players. And you just watch them and you go, God, they're doing a really, really good job. And then you watch the Patriots and you go, do these people have any clue what they're doing? Like, are we sure that Drake May is in safe hands? Obviously, their head coach, who was an impressive player, team captain, so was Antonio Pierce. Look at the Raiders. They're a fucking joke. Dan Campbell was a marginal backup. It doesn't matter how good you were as a player for being a coach. Look at Bill Belichick. There's no way in the prime of his career, at whatever age you wanted to pick, he could have taken one snap in Division I football, let alone the NFL. So what you did as a player in the NFL means nothing for what you're going to be as a head coach. And you watch the Patriots and you go, listen, I understand they don't have much talent. I'm not expecting them to win many games. But can they ever do impressive things? And then you watch the Commanders. I don't think they have much talent. And I watch them every week and you go, God, they're making Marcus Mariota look good. This is why Brian Daboll won Coach of the Year a couple years ago, because you're like, who is on this Giants team? All of a sudden they won 9 games, then won a playoff game. One of the most remarkable coaching jobs I've ever seen. Coaching matters. And when you hire people and you hire the wrong people and you get guys that just are what feels like in over their heads, Antonio Pierce and Gerard Mayo, those guys were stud players, championship level players, team captains, heartbeat of the team. But there's a big difference between doing that with shoulder pads and a helmet on than being the head coach of an NFL team week in, week out. Like Dan Quinn. I doubt he ever could have taken a snap in the NFL. In training camp with the threes, let alone in a regular season game. But he knows what he's doing as a coach. Why? Because they're two completely different things. They don't parallel each other at all. So I just, It's just crazy how much coaching matters. Speaking of coaching, I think Shane Steichen's really good. He's proven that over the years. He knows how to work with quarterbacks. But I do think there are certain players that if they had the best coaching possible, if they had the most talent around them possible, they were on like dream teams, Pro Bowl rosters, they still wouldn't be good enough. This stuff's really, really hard. And there are all types of really, really competitive industries that certain human beings just aren't talented enough and get weeded out. Not because they don't care, not because they don't have the intellect to succeed there, not because of the effort or the work ethic, just simply because whatever business, they don't have the talent. You see this a lot in sports, and you see this a lot in music. Though with technology, you can fake it a little bit more in music. But you definitely see it in pro sports. Because once you get to the highest level, you get weeded out if you're not good enough. And I'm watching Anthony Richardson today going, I want to like this guy. Like everything I heard coming out, people, all my friends in the scouting world that are on like the good teams that were never going to draft him, really liked him. They said once you meet him at the combine, everyone was so impressed with him. Obviously, the physical gifts speak for themselves, but he's a terrible football player right now. Today, when you take Huntley, who got injured in the game, and Tim Boyle, who had one of the worst finishing passes you'll ever see, threw it out of bounds on fourth down. Went 15 of 26 for 115 yards, which I think if I just said Tyler Huntley, Tim Boyle are your quarterbacks that are going to play in a game, it's going to be hard to be worse than that in any NFL game all season long. Anthony Richardson went 10 for 24 for 130 yards in the same game. I don't believe the stats are actually as bad as what I witnessed. Somehow they won. They got very lucky to win. I understand why the Colts are playing him. They drafted him 4th overall. The only way he's going to improve, in theory, is to play through it. But there is a chance that if you just keep rolling him out, he will continue to be bad. And he will never get better. I think there is above a coin flip, well above a 50-50 chance. This is who he kind of is. And in fairness to Shane Steichen during this game, he kind of acknowledged it and treated him like a running back. And this is a guy who gets injured all the time. And it was clear, like, if he gets injured, so be it. We can't, in some must-passing situations, have him throw the ball. If they truly want to win on a weekly basis and try to make the playoffs, they would go with Joe Flacco. That gives them the best chance to win. If they just keep rolling this out, which like I said, I understand, they are just trying to make the guy that they drafted really high work. And they should just come out and say that, which they won't because that's not the way it works. But they don't need to because we all know it. Because if you they could barely beat the Miami Dolphins, who without Tua Tagovailoa is just easily one of the worst teams in the NFL, who played Snoop Huntley, who's, wasn't bad for the Ravens, but you watch him today, it's pretty terrible. And Tim Boyle, who's even worse. And they could barely win that game. I mean, it was 10-10 going down the stretch of the fourth quarter. That's an embarrassing win. You thought the Eagles against the Browns was bad? This is worse. This is worse. It really is. And I think by the end of the season, they might have to acknowledge, not that we picked the wrong guy, because they picked it knowing what they were getting into. A major project, a great unknown. We're swinging for the fences. We're going to try to coach him up. But this guy might just be someone that you can't coach up. He's just not accurate enough. He does not have the touch. He just can't make the throws. Like every once in a while tonight, even Russell Wilson, you saw a couple nice little touch throws. Saw some bad ones, but you also saw some good ones. Like he has it in there. Obviously, Rodgers has it. Any starting quarterback for a long period of time has to have some of that. No one cares. You can't throw 100 miles an hour on every single pass. And that's what it feels like. So, Colts fans, it's wild ride. Sucks because, would we have won this game like 30-10 if Joe Flacco was playing? And the answer is probably yes. Can I tell you about my friends at True Classic? Ball's here, and it's time to step up your game. Right now, you can unlock big savings when you bundle packs. Just go to my exclusive link at trueclassic.com/John. to save. That's trueclassic.com/JOHN. Shop now and elevate your wardrobe. Here's the thing. I wear the same couple t-shirts because I own a lot of them every day. I like to keep it simple. I don't want to think too much. I'm a podcaster. I don't need to dress up. True Classic sent me a bunch of t-shirts. You can see me rocking it right now. They fit great. I actually just ordered multiple six-packs. A six-pack of black t-shirts and a six-pack of gray t-shirts. In these packs, if you don't want one color, you can mix and match. White, blue. I kind of have a darker green on right now. They fit great. I was asking Maria earlier. I'm like, how do I look? She's like, God, you look pretty good in that. I'm like, yeah, I know. That's why I ordered more. They also sent me a pair of joggers and a pair of boxer briefs. Shirts that design your best features with the perfect fit. They really do. Kind of make me look buff. They fit well around my midsection. Cannot recommend them enough. You can mix and match, like I said, and 100% perfect fit. Guarantee and easy returns. So the fall is here. Like I said, step up your game right now. You can unlock big savings when you bundle packs. Just go to my exclusive link at trueclassic.com/John to save. That's trueclassic.com/JOHN. Shop now and elevate your wardrobe today. Okay, one of the big stories today was DeShaun Watson. I was watching the game. He goes to, plant his foot. You immediately see that little Achilles, boop, over, obvious, ripped Achilles, carted off the field. Now, I got about all the games going on at once, so I can only listen to the volume on one game. So in the morning slate, I was basically going back between the Lions-Vikings game and the Packer-Houston game. Early on, I went a little Eagles-Giants, but as that game got away, I didn't listen to that game. So I just listened to two volumes because I can't listen to three volumes at once. I just listened to one volume. So I wasn't listening to anything. But I see him get carted out the field. The team comes up. Don't really think anything of it. As the day goes on, everything starts going viral about how they booed him off the field. Like, yeah, not surprising. Not surprising. And then all the comments come out. Jameis went on. Jameis, if you watch Jameis's 2-minute kind of like rant / soliloquy / diatribe, I don't even know how to describe it. It feels like he's putting on a skit or like acting, going to one of those reads to try to be an actor for a television show. That's what he feels like he's doing. He's really playing the character. But Myles Garrett, who was just being Myles Garrett in the press conference, was pretty pissed off. And he said a lot of things. And one of the comments that he had was that DeShaun has been a model citizen throughout his college career. And most, he used the words, not mine, most of his professional career. It's hard not to laugh when he said, and most of his professional career. I just think this because I think it's most players, and we'll see the media takes. There are going to be some that are crushing the fans because they love to. Now, I think opinions are going to be all over the map on this. But I know this. There is not another player in that game on the Browns or on the Bengals. Coaches, sideline people, the chain gang, any human that could have got a leg shattered, that could have popped an Achilles, that could have been knocked out, that if they would have gone off the field on a cart and given a thumbs up from Jamar Chase to Joe Burrow to the Bengals, you name it, there's not another human that crowd, like any crowd, would have given a standing ovation to. But this fan base, they traded for this guy, and they gave a historic amount of money, and he was immediately suspended for 11 games for the massage therapist. I think the number's up to 28 total. So we immediately get this. I'm just putting myself in a Browns fan's shoes. We immediately get this quarterback who's been good for the Texans. Then he's immediately suspended. And our owner and our front office fudged the contract because we knew it was coming. We only paid him $1 million. 11 games. We've seen guys get in trouble. We've seen guys get, 3, 4, whatever. 11 games, which is kind of a weird number, but it's a lot. It's a fucking massive number. So all of a sudden, 11 games, all the stuff going off the field. So it's like, okay, every single person in that stadium thinks the guy's a scumbag. But listen, you watch sports, you root for teams long enough, you root for some scumbags. So it's like, hey, if you're good, whatever. Well, then this guy starts playing, and he's the opposite of good. He's atrocious. Statistically, he's legitimately one of the worst quarterbacks in the history of the NFL. This season, he was. And I would say over the course of those couple games or 6 games when he came back, and then last year before he got injured, it couldn't have been going much worse. So it's like, wait, I'm a Browns fan. I've been watching this team for my whole life. Let's just put me in those shoes. I'm 40 years old. I've seen a lot of bad football. I've rooted for a lot of teams that have lost, but you know what? We've had guys that find it easy to root for. Nick Chubb, stud. Joe Thomas over the years, badass. Right? Now, Myles Garrett, baller. I want that guy on my squad. But I'm supposed to just like this guy? Obviously, no one in that city wants that guy on their team. They're stuck with him. Then he gets injured, which actually makes it worse because any of these potential, like, could we get rid of him and include some draft picks? That guy is yours. It is over. Career's a wrap. Like, this thing's done. But I just don't blame them for booing him. I don't think they're booing him. One, he wasn't going to die. Fucking tore his Achilles. He'll be fine. They're booing the situation. Do you know who they were really booing? The owner. That was an FU to the owner for making the fans watch a guy that every single person has the same opinion of, which isn't good from a character standpoint, who is one of the worst players. And this is a team who has watched crappy quarterbacks. They're not expecting Rodgers or Favre to come running out that tunnel for the Browns. But for $230 million, just a functional starter would have been great. And this guy was awful. Bad guy, worst player. And I just don't think it's very shocking. And anyone criticizing them, like, I just don't think any other player, any other person in the entire league, in any stadium, is getting booed in that situation, except him. Here's also what I think. I think you could put him in another stadium. I think he probably gets booed there too. I actually feel pretty confident he gets booed in any other stadium. So it's like, this is a DeShaun Watson thing, not a fan thing, not a city thing. And it's because of the owner. Because the only reason that he's on the team is because the owner was willing to give him that contract. When he pops his Achilles, obviously the season's over. I doubt we ever see him play another snap for the Browns. He absolutely, it was like the equivalent of the Lufthansa heist. Absolutely robbed the Browns. I mean, it's an all-time highway robbery, right? It's just props to Mogetta, his agent, because they bent over the Browns and they took all the money. And they never thought twice about giving any of it back. No matter how many balls they threw to the other team, no matter how many balls skipped the grounds, no matter how many lawsuits came their way. It's all guaranteed, baby. Couple other quick things. It's crazy when Geno Smith plays well. When Geno Smith plays well, which he never does against the 49ers, but then he plays other teams like today, you're just watching him make some throws. You're like, God, this guy, he's just all over the map. It's got to be a frustrating player to coach because they are so explosive on offense. Kenneth Walker is such a good multi-dimensional player. He's a great running back. He can catch the ball. I mean, DK, I think he's got to be one of the most unique freaks in the history of the NFL. The size, the speed, the power, the athleticism. He's just an all-time athletic outlier. And you watch him today. I know he got dinged up toward the end, but he made a catch in the middle of the game where he goes up, ahead of a DB. It's like, what a monster. And I think their coaching staff's really good. Now with the Niners losing, they're in first place, but it kind of just hit. If Geno plays well, their coaching staff's good, their talent's good, they can beat a lot of teams. And you leave that game going, is Atlanta any good? Is Atlanta any good? Listen, you lose some games. They got worked in that game. And you look back, it's earlier in the season, me and Stuckey talked about this on Thursday. Their record could easily be the other way right now. I mean, easily. So I still like some of the players on their team, and I'm not just selling all my Kirko Cousins stock, but they got worked today. And last but not least, it's got to be a good feeling as a GM to make a trade And when you got a good team, it's just easier to be aggressive with trades. So it probably wasn't that difficult for Brandon Beane to trade for Amari, but it's still like you hope it works, right? You want to look good. You want the guy to be productive, and then you get him, and you look up, and he scores a touchdown. And on the play, when you watch it in slow motion, he did not know what he was doing. He had to look at Keon Coleman. Coleman did like he tried to do like a sneaky little like run a post. DBs are standing right there. And it didn't even matter. Ran right to the goalpost. Touchdown, Josh Allen, Amari Cooper. So props to Brandon Beane. Props to the Bills. Make a trade. Media touchdown.